This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was a good weekend for you. Your alma mater won this weekend. My San Diego Chargers playing the sports ball are currently, well, they're in the lead right now. They were sucking earlier, so. Oh, God, football kills me. It's so stressful sometimes.
Really?
Well, the Chargers are kind of a hot and cold team. When we're good, we're 12-4. When we suck, we're 4-12. And yeah, for those of you outside the United States, I'm sorry. It is that time of year, and I do enjoy my sports ball. I do enjoy the soccer too, the football. I do enjoy that. But yeah, they were my team when I lived in San Diego for a long time, and I still kind of follow them. So they suck right now, and there's a big stadium thing going on Tuesday for them where they're trying to decide if they're going to move to LA or not. And I don't think it's going to pass, honestly. I think that the Chargers have not done well enough to put a quality product out on the field. So, oh well. But that's not information security. That's millionaires talking to billionaires about trillionaires worth of stuff. So it's a bunch of junk. So, how was your week, Mr. Betcher?
Not bad. Full of work. So, yeah. Yep.
Well, it's good to be busy. It's good to be busy.
There is no shortage of that in the IR world.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Let me ask you something. Do you ever get the blahs? Where you just don't want to do anything security related? You want to just come home, take your shoes off, and not touch a computer?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, if you have a long day of work and you don't want to moonlight that night, which I work on LogMD all the time, so. Yeah. Occasionally I'll be like, I'm just burned out.
Yeah, my thing is I want to learn it, but I have this squirrel thing where I want to work on something and then I, start researching a topic and then 2 hours later I'm like, oh crap, I was supposed to be doing this thing back here. And then nothing ever gets done, which is one of the reasons why I couldn't follow through with my OSCP. It was like I got hung up on one thing because I felt like if I didn't know it well enough, then I was going to not do well on the exam. So,
Wait, first you said you're like, ooh, squirrel, and then you say you got hung up on one thing. So I'm confused.
Okay, so it was like, I think it was the Stack Overflow stuff. For those of you taking the OSCP, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'd start researching these things, and I'd start researching the shellcode and okay, well, how does shellcode translate? Is there a way to, decipher shellcode? Is there, can you generate your own shellcode without using things like Metasploit? And for the longest time when I was doing my OSCP, I tried to not use Metasploit as much as possible because I was on the understanding that you couldn't use, at least the way I heard it, you couldn't use Metasploit more than once in the test. Well, what they meant was you couldn't use the payloads more than once in the exam. You could use the shellcode generators and all that, I guess, as much as you wanted to. Which, after I realized that was the case, I was like, oh, God, this sucks. Because they have Ruby scripts and Python scripts that generate the shellcode for you. I was trying to generate the shellcode myself. So, that was kind of discouraging after I realized I was not reading the fine print, such as it was. So, I'm trying to get back into that security stuff. I don't know if it's just the time of year, but I've really been having the blahs about information security of whether or not I'm, you can make a difference or, where I need to be heading in my career. I think it's one of those times where I'm trying to decide if I want to try to be technical or try to, just remain an auditor type or a vulnerability management type. So we'll find out. I'm sure everything will straighten itself out shortly. But
well, you'll find your niche some way, somehow.
Well,
I
being a
don't know.
professional
And
podcaster
maybe,
doesn't pay the bills, so
yeah, I was gonna say maybe this is it, right?
No, I doubt it highly.
It may,
it's a good gig. I love educating people, and actually that's where we're heading tonight. We don't have an interview, but we have a pretty interesting discussion about chain of custody with regards to collecting evidence for possible court cases. So I actually got this, and I told Mr. Betcher we were going to say this before, but I was actually reading one of the books that I'd bought back a couple years ago, CEH version 9, Certified Ethical Hacker version 9. And one of the sections was collecting evidence when possibly going to court. Or I guess it's not the same as e-discovery, or it might be e-discovery, but it's not forensics. Forensics and e-discovery, it says, are slightly different. And one of the things that they were talking about was the proper chain of custody on how to make sure that if you have a court case or anything like that, that the data is handled properly. So I thought we would go through that this week and discuss how you can help. If you're a small to medium business and you can't find a guy who is a forensic analyst or an in-case certified professional to help your company. You'll be able to do what's necessary to get the data possibly for your court cases.
yeah, it's important to know the basics on that because you may wind up thinking that you have a case against some perpetrator or criminal, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden it's just dismissed outright because you didn't collect the evidence or take care of the evidence properly.
Yep. A lot of the articles I saw on, making sure you get that chain of custody, any electronic evidence like computer logs or anything like that, immediately gets scrutinized by the defense because if they can prove that the chain of custody wasn't maintained, they have a grounds for mistrial or dismissal of charges because they could say, well, the evidence was tampered with. This evidence isn't any good, and a lot of times, the entire case will hinge upon the evidence collected during, in the computer.
So, what is chain of custody? Is that like, all right, I got on the computer, I took out the hard drive, and then Bob took the hard drive and Bob made a copy of it and he hashed the copy and wrote the hash down on the outside of the bag, et cetera, et cetera. That kind of chain of custody.
Yeah. A lot of it's like what you see on any police procedural drama that you watch. Um, you know, Instead of the bloody knife at the scene where they're picking it up with two fingers with surgical gloves and dropping it into a plastic bag and well, run this off to the lab and run tests, which is exactly probably what doesn't happen because they have to know, okay, person A found it, person A picked it up, put it in the bag, dated, swat, everything. He gave it to person X. Person X sent it, drove it at 9:15 p.m. to the lab at 9:19. It was given from person X to person Y. All of that has to be logged. And very similarly with e-evidence, you have to the chain of custody. It just maintains integrity of evidence from seizure through the production in court.
Yeah.
So you have to
All
know
right.
when the law, like let's say web logs, like you're having to look through web logs for something. One, you have to name the individual who's collecting the evidence. Things like date, place, and time, where it was. You know, Keeping track of all the data, who's received it, who's storing it, who's retrieving it, who's taking it to trial. Hash, like you mentioned earlier, hashes of the data to make sure that there's been no tampering of the files. Okay, on this day we hashed the data, it has this hash. Today we hashed the data, it still has the same hash. There's been no change, which is why it's important to not use hashes like MD5. You'd want to use like what we talked about the other day, SHA or something like that, where collisions are not a problem. You don't want
Yeah.
a hash that is very collision based. Um, so
Well, okay. So what do you do first of all when you have a like somebody's laptop and you have to make sure that it is admissible. What are some steps you need to do? Do you have to take a copy of the hard drive? Do you do a memory dump if it's turned on? What are the steps?
Well, I think it probably has a lot to do with what data you're looking for in the first place. If you're looking for, you know, obviously there's software out there that will help you do this stuff, but it's a little on the expensive side. You were mentioning the one I found online was called Encase. And, I mentioned Encase Certified Professionals. They have a whole certification. But the information and the software price for that's quite expensive for maybe a small or medium business. If you're a large company, you'll probably already have the software. But you said it was what, about $4,000?
Yeah, from what I Googled, it was about 4,000.
Okay.
So not too bad.
That's for one copy, though. That's assuming
it's
one copy for one machine.
For one machine. I think you have one copy for your company.
Oh.
If I'm not mistaken. So,
okay.
So, yeah.
The first thing you'd want to do is make sure you've got backups of everything, and you want to make sure that you hash your backups. So for a laptop, for instance, you'd want to be able to take an image that is, it gets down almost byte for byte. You'd almost want to run like DD, the Linux command DD, and you'd want to run it from a live CD. You'd want to be able to make sure that you could prove that there's been no change to that hard drive of any kind.
Yeah.
So you'd want to start up, say, a live Kali instance, and you'd want to mount that drive read-only. You don't want to be putting any data on it. You don't want to take any data off of it. You'd want to do things like, doing a bit-by-bit, copy of that drive. This is why it's important for, if you don't know these things, find somebody who can do it for you, or, probably call law enforcement if it's going to be something you might think would go to trial. Don't be afraid to reach out to your local law enforcement folks. But, I would say do a bit by bit of the hard drive, save the contents somewhere. A lot of times that is quite large. So if you've got a couple terabyte drive, you're going to have to make sure you have a couple terabytes of space, because the image that you're going to grab is going to take a couple of terabytes of space.
Well, I know when I was in the forensics class, we had compressed drive copies, right?
How'd you do that?
It was a program called Expert Witness, I guess.
Okay, that sounds a lot like the Encase stuff then.
Yeah, so we didn't actually, build the images. We took the images that they already had and used those images to do our forensicating.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but they were compressed.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not always physical laptops or something. A lot of times you may find something going on and it requires it was done on a VM. So a lot of times you can just clone the VMs, which makes that a lot easier.
Yeah.
But you also have to, make sure that your chain of custody is there. Or you hash the VM before you clone it. You take a hash of the clone to make sure it's a complete copy. There's also different types of evidence. So they broke it down in the CEH, but I found this elsewhere. One of them, the different types of evidence. They said the best evidence is the category evidence that is admissible by requirement in any court of law. So the existence of best evidence eliminates your ability to use any copies of the same evidence in court. So that's basically you give them the laptop. It sounds like if the offending laptop, it's right there. So secondary is a copy of the original evidence. So this could be backup drives or drive images. Evidence may not always be admissible in a court of law and is not admissible if best evidence of the item exists. So they'll take the laptop over a backup of the laptop if the laptop exists. Yeah.
Well, maybe the laptop has fingerprints on it, so you can't really, copy that.
Well, that would be the other reason. So, one of the other things that you don't see in the police procedurals is that chain of custody. It's probably tedious. It's like, you see hackers in movies and, everybody's just typing on the home row and whatever. And then, real hackers are just sitting there running Nmap for 5 hours and doing nothing. You know, this is the chain of custody stuff. It's like they have to fill out all the forms, and they have to do the reports and everything. So they talked about the chain of custody is enforcing 6 key points, and those are, what's that?
I'm like waiting for those 6 key points with bated breath.
Oh, so the 6 questions asked are what the evidence has been collected. So when you're filling out your logs, what did you get, what did you keep? That would how was the media obtained? Hold on, I'm rearranging tabs here.
Oh, and when you're going through this stuff and collecting evidence, you're seemingly going to have to replay this for someone else, like a judge or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
I think you should get a notebook and start writing stuff down. Everything you do. Okay, I did this, at such and such time, right? Oh, yeah. That's pretty important because that is admissible in court. Mm-hmm. Anything you write down,
yep,
that's good stuff.
Yeah. They recommend if you're involved in the chain of custody, keeping the information up to date at all times. So you don't want to get it too far ahead. You'd be like, oh, I've already checked it in, but I didn't, remember who picked it up at the crime scene or whatever. Or I went to this company and I picked it up, and it's like, oh, I forgot who drove it over here. The important thing is to make sure that you keep track of all that
on pen and paper, right?
Well, yeah, because the last thing you want is to do all this hard work analyzing all the data, and then realize that the guy who was supposed to drive it over here stopped at a Wendy's for 15 minutes, and the evidence was out of his sight for 15 minutes, and you don't know if the evidence was tampered with during that time. So you have to know exactly where he went. So yeah, one of the questions they asked is where was the evidence traveled, and where was the evidence ultimately stored. So what reason did each person have for handling the evidence? Why should I let Joe Bob the janitor have access to the data on this computer? He has no business touching it. Which could pollute your case, because it's like, well, Joe Bob the janitor did touch it, so did he touch it before or after we already made copies? And then you have to go through extra rigmarole about, okay, do the hashes match? What did he change? Did he change anything? Our new Slack channel that we've got for the podcast, I asked the question out there if anybody had any experience with these or other forensic software, and Mr. Phil Byer, who is a longtime listener of our show, he had said that he'd only heard secondhand perspective on the difficulty stemming from poor handling. So it sounds like it's a systemic thing, which is probably why they have certified professionals for this thing, because they're they regularly handle these kinds of things.
Yeah, defense attorneys will go crazy trying to get evidence dismissed.
Well, it's a technicality, isn't it? I mean, if they can get the guy may be guilty, or the person may be guilty is all get out, but if he can get his client off on a technicality,
yep,
that's still a win, So it's important for you, if you're having to collect this evidence, to make sure you log everything, make sure that you're doing hashes of everything. You don't edit the primary evidence; you're only editing the backups, and There's various different types. I mentioned the various different types of evidence. The other ones is, direct evidence. They talk about the results of testimony or interviews of individuals. So if you see them doing something, that you have to keep track of all that stuff, and you can get complicated. I mean, it can be audio-visual evidence. There can be computer logs. There can be hard drive images. I mean, you can get quite a bit of information, that you've got to go through, and you have to make sure the videos aren't tampered with, that the audio's not tampered with. I mean, at that point, I think, depending on what your skill level is, you may want to contact, make sure that the police get involved, or you have some kind of forensic people get involved. Yeah. But that runs counter to, a lot of philosophies about, well, I'll just reimage the box. I got to get this stuff back up and running. I can't have any outages. When you can't be playing around on an active crime scene if you're at some point you have to run things like incident response and business continuity during a crime scene investigation like that. So that system may be offline. So it may be something business critical, but you need to really. This is one reason why you really need to have backups for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you need to have the ability to back up those drives and have them be admissible.
Yeah.
Right. If you need to go back in business, take a copy of the drive, stick in the copy, and boot up. Right.
Yeah.
I suppose. I've never done this before, so I'm. Don't take what I say as gospel, but that seems like what you might want to do. And the IR that I'm in is, hey, let's figure out the scope first of any, potential, compromise and see which computers are probably compromised and which aren't, and go from there. Yeah. And then I guess our primary focus is get the company back in business, but we may have to evaluate what exactly is the process for when something big happens, an advanced attack or whatnot, and see what we need to do in that situation. Follow guidelines and get that signed off by management,
Yep. Yeah, and that's I think that's why it's important to be able to do failover of those systems. And this may be something, depending on how big your company is, where you may want to put in some kind of requirements in your incident response policy, where it's like, if we do have some kind of continued offline possibility where we can't get the system back online, what is our hospitals do this with HIPAA. They call it I just had it. It was like return to operation. That's it. Return to operation. So, how long can we be offline with this, and what will we do while the system is offline? It has to do with a lot of health record systems, but when the health record system is offline, they go to paper. And they have to record dosages and times, and they have specific guidelines and training for that. So this might be something for an incident response or security incident training or a tabletop you guys do. What happens if our chat server's down? Well, it's not going to be a big deal. I mean, people just won't be able to share CAD videos or something. But if you're a company that is trying to eschew email, and instant messaging is your lifeblood inside the company, this may be a bigger deal, where you may have to open up your email to allow internal emails if you're not doing internal email. So so I think it's important to know these kinds of things if you work with a big enough company that may have to you may have to run into these things, because I can guarantee a lot of people out there don't.
Well, you also have to decide, do you really, this is all about attribution, right? And
sure.
If you get attacked by seemingly North Korea, right? Mm-hmm. Well, does it really matter? You get back to business and you move on. Are you really going to be able to sue North Korea? Or is some 400-pound hacker in his basement pretending to come from North Korea?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't thinking along the lines of North Korea. I was thinking about, let's say you had to fire somebody because you found out he was embezzling funds from the company, and he was doing wire transfers from his workstation because he had that ability outside of the company.
You could be strategic on that, though. It's not a pants on fire type situation.
No, you're right. I mean, for that case, it's not necessarily like you said, pants on fire, but it will be a security incident that has to be remediated. I'm not thinking for an operational standpoint, but let's there has to be an example of something that would be mission critical. Let's say you run a bank and somebody got into your funds transfer system, because that never happens. We'll call it fast. And let's say the system transferred $80 million to another bank. That's an example of what I'm talking about. Mission critical system, it's transferring money. All of a sudden, somebody who shouldn't have been transferring money is transferring money. Now somebody has to come in and take that system offline because now they have to run archives, they have to run backups, they have to do something. That's mission critical for you. So what's your problem at this point is you can't do business. You're not going to be pulling any money in. You're not going to be taking any money out. So you have to have a failover plan. You have to have an incident response plan. Those are the kinds of scenarios I'm thinking of.
Right, and you have to think about these in advance because it may be just fine and dandy to take a dump of the logs, and you won't have to shut the system down, and that might be admissible, right? So let's talk about this chain of custody, 6 key points.
Okay. What?
Number one, what evidence has been collected?
Yeah. So these are things that, when the defense attorney goes, okay, I want to see your chain of custody, you have to, these are some of the questions that may come up. These are not all the questions that come up. So evidence collected, what evidence was collected? Okay, in this case, we'd have,
Joe's laptop.
Login logs, we'd have web logs, we'd have, hard drive evidence, browser cache information, maybe even the contents of memory dump. If the program was put into place that would automatically do that, if there was malware involved or something.
And how was the evidence obtained? Basically, how did you get your hands on it?
Yep.
Where did you get it from?
Yep.
When was the evidence collected? Was it collected too late? Could it have been tampered with because of the time frame?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Operationally. I mean, if you don't find out until 2 weeks later, things could have happened that would have changed the existing evidence.
Right.
Going back to how the evidence was obtained, some of the things you want to talk about when you're talking about how it was obtained was you might need serial numbers of the hard drives that you pulled. What time that happened, what type of data is there? Are we talking all text files? Are we talking documents? Are we talking, PDFs? Are we talking, database files? Those kinds of things. What type of, who's the manufacturer of the media in case something goes wrong and you have to contact Samsung to get a brand new drive controller board for the melted board when somebody attempted to destroy the drive. So I mean, who handled the evidence? That's pretty good.
Could have been copied over the network.
Exactly.
Any number of ways.
Yeah, exactly. And now you're wondering if there's multiple copies of that evidence out there. So you may have to, pull that information elsewhere. So
then, who has handled the evidence?
Yep.
So you need a chain of custody there, as far as basically what we're talking about.
Yeah, who all laid eyes on the evidence, who's touched it, who's changed it. It may also be, like you said, several days after the fact, who all had access to the evidence on the system before you decided to take measurements of the evidence. So if it was the guy or the person you think who did it, there may also be 20 other people in his group or 20 other people at the company who would have had access to that data between the time that he did it or she did it to the time where you took the artifacts out.
Yep. And next is, what reason did each person have for handling the evidence? Again, you need a log of the people that touched it and why they touched it.
Oh my God! Yeah, that sounds like that could be quite involved. I mean, if you had a bunch of people who handled the evidence, because all those people are technically could be suspects, or they're going to be questioned about why did you touch this evidence? Oh, it was my job. This oh, I was told to by blah blah officer. I was the one who pulled it initially for the police or whatever.
Where was it stored and how did it get there?
Yeah,
where was the last question?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I think the less people have access to the data, just like with access control systems and role-based access, I think the less people have access to data, the better. So you want to try to keep that chain, I think, as short as possible between people who picked it up at the crime scene to whoever's storing it for long term between arrest and when the court case starts. So the less people, I think, the better. Unless it's law enforcement, and they should have their own proper chain of custody for that. So
I was thinking about a related yet unrelated topic.
Go ahead.
When I was taking my forensics course, we were on a team and we were looking through these series of disk images.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy on my team was in law enforcement, and he had this program. They said you could use any program you have. So he had this program that they use at the, I guess for the police department.
Yeah.
Which basically extracts all the images from the hard drive. So he was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through all these images, trying to find evidence. And
was this a Windows box? I mean, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Images. So like system restore images?
No.
Oh.
Like images, PDF, JPEG
GIFs.
stuff like
Okay.
that,
Okay.
PNGs,
Okay.
any type of picture.
Yeah.
And most of the pictures he was scrolling through were icons. And
Sure.
I was going, I mean, this is just the way I think. If it's less than, I don't know, 1,000 pixels,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not the droid you're looking for. So I gotta think there's a whitelist or some sort of, hey, I'm gonna just ignore this small image because it's probably nothing.
Yeah.
And just look for the big images.
Yep.
But
well, I think that's
yeah.
I think that's what those in-case softwares do. They say what it does is it allows you to go through and pick and choose, because ideally we're saying this from like a small business area, but I mean if you are really doing a something for possible lawsuit or criminal action, you're going to want to get some professional people in there. And the professionals are going to be able to, one, put their own reputation on the line, and two, they're going to be able to pare down the stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like those icons. I'm sure he can go through and go, okay, yeah, this 5,000 icons, this 50 or 500 megs worth of stuff is totally and completely useless. The date time stamps on these haven't changed. So yeah, you'd want to look at like date time stamps, stuff that's been changed or modified in the last half dozen days or so. You could probably get rid of 99% of the operating system stuff. I think that's how they would go about doing. They would, limit it from a couple terabytes down to a couple of hundred megabytes, and then that would be what they would submit as evidence. And then once they're on the witness stand, they would have to go through the whole idea of why I took this 2 terabyte drive and I only said that these things were important, these artifacts were the most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I must say that there's a lot of stuff on your hard drive that if you weren't in the know, you'd be like, what? That's on there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff they can find. You'd be surprised.
Oh, yeah.
Also, if your system gets cryptoed for some reason and you're only using a quarter, half of your hard drive, chances are all that data is still on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'll be able to get it back.
Using forensics tools, yeah.
Forensics tools, yeah. So, there's a lot of they're saying, so when you're looking at digital forensic software, so one of the things you want to look at, let's say you're going to buy your in-case or whatever the other ones are. I keep mentioning in-case because it's the only one I know. I'm sure there's others out there. They said, don't confuse e-discovery with forensics. Some vendors for forensic suites are marketing their tools for e-discovery because the steps involved with forensics work are actually subsets of the e-discovery process. While forensics tools can perform e-discovery work, they discourage others from doing the opposite, using non-forensics tools for forensics work. Oh. They suggest that you do train your staff before using these tools, which is that's pretty much That's pretty much known. Don't forget mobile devices. So you want to make sure when you're buying software that mobile devices, which can also be used to migrate all kinds of data out, is important. Do expect to use more than one tool because no one tool is good. So, you may buy one forensic system software suite and find out that another one will do just a little bit more, or it will do something that the one you bought doesn't do, so you may end up having to buy more than one type of forensic suite for your e-discovery. So I think the important thing to remember is if something like this does happen, don't be afraid to engage local law enforcement, because they probably have, if they don't have somebody themselves, I mean, if you live in Mayberry, you probably don't have anybody there, but they would be able to find people who would be qualified to help you do this stuff. And, you're just as much a victim as your data is. So you should not be, I don't know, you shouldn't feel embarrassed for reaching out to law enforcement for help of this kind.
No, or anyone else in forensics that you might know or might look up. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the industry that are willing to help on the forensic side.
Yep.
Right. So I'm sure it would pay off dividends potentially to look into how to collect evidence should you ever need to.
Yeah. I'm almost guaranteed all these big breaches that have happened in the last few years all involved getting, local, state, federal, law enforcement involved. They've all done the e-discovery to find out, where certain malware infections have occurred, So, I mean, they do have to engage them because, if you have an average, like what we talked about last week with BSIM, it was like an average of 5 people on your security team. Which one of those 5 has anything having to do with, e-discovery or forensics? You may wear a lot of hats, but none of them probably do. So, don't jump in over your heads. But if you have to, there's some really good stuff in our show notes on how to do your proper chain of custody, because you may end up. It may be just easier to just pull all the hard drives and give them to the law enforcement, or they may make you want to do some stuff before you turn them over. So that might be another thing. So. So, is there anything else we want to talk about with regard to doing chain of custody?
I don't think so.
Did we forget anything?
Like I said, I don't know. I've never done it before. I don't know too much about it, but it's definitely something that's important. Yeah. So I'll be basically looking at that with the team in the future and making sure that we know what to do when the time comes,
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of companies who perform IR services often will be able to, you may be able to reach out to them as well and get information. They may also be able to help you out with those things too. So any company out there that does incident response services might be able to, if they can't help you, they'll point you to somebody who can, I would hope. So I was actually surprised that the CEH version 9, I'm looking at the Cybex version of the book, but I was just reading through it because it was one that I hadn't seen in a long time, and I was trying to go to sleep, and it's exam 312-50 and came out a few years ago, but they were talking about all this stuff, and I was like, well, this is something that you don't learn in a quote unquote hacking certification. I didn't hear about any of this in the OSCP, so I was like, I'm not exactly sure what the CEH is for in this case, because this is not about hacking stuff. This is about incident response and, disaster recovery and business continuity related stuff. So I just found it interesting that they were touching on this kind of stuff. They even go through some of the laws and regulations, and it's a fairly decent little book. I was running through it just to see if, it was something that, I might want to, give out to some kids in my area here. So,
yeah, interesting that a hacker type book would be talking about chain of custody.
Yep. I think we're done for the week. I do have one other thought. We do have a Slack channel now. If you want to join us and talk about stuff doing with the podcast, or if you've got any suggestions or you want to ask questions, you can go to breaksec.signup.team and you can join us there. We just hit 30 people. Well, actually, Mr. Betcher was number 30. If he can figure out how to log in and start chatting.
It's not me, it's my phone.
Well, you know
I don't take any responsibility for that.
They have a fancy Slack app on Windows and Mac, so you can poke around on that. What I'd like to do is maybe start some kind of study group, like people who were maybe wanting to go through, not OSCP in particular, but let's say you were working on another information security related certification, not CISP necessarily, but just anything. If there's enough call for it, maybe we could get a group set up on Slack or do web conferences or something, and go through a book and do like a book club or something, and do like a. Apparently, we're about to score. Oh, yeah, we did. Okay, we just scored, and I think we might actually win this one. Okay, right on. It is 42-28 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Anyway.
So Slack. I mean, maybe that's your calling, dude.
Yeah. Well, I can't make it through the OSCP by myself, and to be fair, the forum community over there at Offensive Security kind of sucks. I tried using their stuff, and all I got was a bunch of dumbasses who told me to try harder, even though, I spent several days and hours trying to get stuff through, so I was unhappy with the lack of community there. So I thought, well, maybe I can start my own community. If you guys are looking for actual help and you've done your due diligence and you've tried as hard as you believe you have, feel free to. That might be another reason for you to come on our Slack channel, and people who are there could answer some questions that you have. But I would like to see if we can start a book club or something where we can go through a book by chapter. And if that's something that interests you, please join us on our Slack channel and tell me that it sucks or that's a good idea, or ideas for books. That would be great too. Mr. Betcher, do you have any ideas for books, or does that idea suck, or is that idea good, or what?
I think that some people might find it really valuable.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on the book. I mean,
yeah.
So there may be a book that Group A would like, but a completely different group that nobody in Group A would like, but Group B would like totally get into. So, yeah, it just depends on the book. Different topics are not for everybody. We have a lot of securities divided into a bunch of different subgroups.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you have your web app pen testers, and then you've got your digital forensicators, right? And different topics won't suit everyone. So.
Well, we can always go through one book, and then, in a couple of months, we'll go through another book that you may think is crap, and you're not going to enjoy that one, so you won't do it. That kind of thing. I know they do that in Austin. I know Josh Sokol has a group over there at his company, and they used to do like a book club where they would.
OWASP study group.
Yeah, OWASP study group. Yeah, I mean his is physical and local and in person. We have the ability to communicate by the internet, so that was just a thought I had a couple of days ago. So. Anyway, hit us up on our Slack channel, breaksec.signup.team, and join our group here, and we'll hash it out and make something happen if possible. So, Mr. Betcher, if people wanted to get a hold of you to talk about the podcast, comments, suggestions, how would they go about doing so?
You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at BetcherPwned.
Okay.
So hit me up there, and yeah.
Right on.
That's how you can get a hold of me. That's probably the best way.
Okay. Yeah, until you figure out Slack. So I am on Twitter as well. You can follow me at Brian Brake. That's BRYAN BRAKE. We also have an official Twitter for the podcast. It's at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. We're pretty much everywhere on the internet now. We're kind of a thing. It's a movement, really, bowel movement. No, we have an RSS feed. We have we have a YouTube channel. We're on iTunes. Everything's in the show notes. You can go to www.breakingsecurity.com and check out our show notes for this and other past shows. We're on Facebook and Tumblr and Player.fm and Stitcher and TuneIn. We're on SoundCloud. So, hit us up. Tell us, also, neither one of us are forensicators or forensic diagnosticate. What did you call that?
Forensicator.
Okay. All right. So if you are one of those, we don't mind having you on to talk about how, some examples of, what you do or techniques that you use. We would enjoy.
Tell us where we went wrong.
Yeah, tell us where we went wrong, because I'm fairly certain we probably did. But that's okay. That's what part of learning is about. So, So we'd appreciate anybody who's done this in the past to come on the show. We'll give you an hour, man. We'll let you talk. So that's it for this week of Breaking Down Security. Mr. Betcher, I hope to see you again real soon. And to all the listeners out there, I hope to see you again real soon.
Bye-bye.